ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video we're going to be talking about Punisher number 2 by Jason Aaron, Jesus Sáenz, and Paul Aceceda. And in this video we're going to talk about Frank Castle's new origin story, as well as why he has the powers of Ghost Rider. So without further ado, let's talk about Punisher number 2. Okay, so for those who have not been keeping up, or if you missed my previous video covering Punisher number 1, the thing you need to know is that Punisher now works with the Hand, the secret organization comprised of undead ninjas that literally spans centuries, and some would even dare say has been around since the first person was ever killed. Frank Castle is now what is referred to as the Fist of the Beast. If you are familiar with the character Moon Knight, how Moon Knight is the Fist of Khonshu, basically it's just a way of saying that he is supposed to be the avatar, the force of the whatever respective deity he serves. And in this case, it would be the Beast, who is the revered god of the Hand. The Beast is, for all intents and purposes, responsible for why the Hand have as much power as they do. Now, I did just say the Beast is a god, but to be more accurate, he's more like just a very high-level demon, but the Hand revere him as such, as a god. And right now, Frank Castle is working for the Hand for the simple reason that they were able to resurrect his dead wife. Now, we did posit whether or not Frank Castle's children, who were also murdered in the attack that for all intents and purposes turned him into the Punisher, the children have not been resurrected yet, or at least not as far as we can tell. We know this because when he's talking with his now undead wife, Maria, she asks when are the kids coming home? And Frank's answer basically tells us everything that we need to know. There's a part of his bargain with the Hand that is yet to have been met, so the children have not been resurrected yet. But what we do know is that Maria, for whatever it's worth, while she is currently still alive, one will notice that her eyes have changed to be a more almost demonic color, and you can still see the gunshot wounds riddled across her body, which would let you know that the children, should they be resurrected, will have the same appearance. The only reason Frank is doing all of this is because it gets him his family back, not to mention the Hand have promised him that they would change their ways. Well, as much as murderers and assassins can change their ways, they're still murderers and assassins, but now they're murderers and assassins for the Punisher, going after the people he selects, taking them out, not taking contracts from unscrupulous beings as they would in the past. At least as far as he knows. But this comic actually gives us two things brand new to the Punisher. For one, a revised origin. Now, of course, many people may or may not know that Frank Castle was turned into the Punisher when he witnessed his family being gunned down by the mob. Now, depending on the story, sometimes it's just, generic mob or mafioso types. In some cases, it's the Maja, who are kind of like the big mob boss family in the Marvel Comics universe, and that is the story. That is what galvanized Frank Castle into becoming the Punisher. However, this comic changes all that. Now, yeah, sure, he became the Punisher the day that he witnessed his wife and children being murdered. However, he already had murderous tendencies within him. This story is probably going to be controversial to some, and I'm honestly not surprised. This does drastically change how you may or may not view the Punisher. The key thing that's changed here is that his murderous tendencies have been within him since he was a child. He just had a better way of controlling them. We discover that early on, when he's roughly 12 years of age, he's very likely already killed someone before. He has interest in very strange and unusual things, like having books about beheadings and gunshot wounds. Now, I'm gonna date myself here, but he's basically the kid that had a copious amount of those Faces of Death videos that used to circulate around the late 90s, early 2000s, which were videos depicting people being killed. He's that type of kid. For whatever reason, he's interested in all this, and the patented Punisher logo that everyone was so worried was gonna go away it's still there. He was actually drawing it all over his notebooks and notepads. This kid is incredibly disturbed, and no one really knows what to do with him. For those who are familiar with characters like the Hulk, this is not that dissimilar of a retcon. Yeah, I know there's a big difference between a gamma-powered rage monster and a guy who witnesses family get killed turning into a murder hobo. But hear me out. Going back to 2007's World War Hulk Gamma Files #1, that comic retconned Bruce Banner's origin. Originally, Bruce Banner became the Hulk in Incredible Hulk #1 in 1962 when he was struck by his own gamma bomb. But in World War Hulk Gamma Files #1, it was revealed that the Hulk was always within him. The gamma bomb just unleashed it. That's kind of the framing that they're going for with Frank Castle. He was already the Punisher. He was already a disturbed individual who wanted to inflict violence on other people. And from the framing of this comic, he specifically went after bullies. As is mentioned in this issue, he's not going after innocent people, he's going after bad people already. However, it was him witnessing his family be murdered before his very eyes that gave him that last final push over the edge to become who he was always meant to be. Now, I do kind of find a little bit of this origin story a little bit problematic because it kind of already shows that Punisher was already a maniac, even as a child, and I find this even more interesting considering how much Ezra Miller has been in the news lately, but it reminds me of the movie We Need to Talk About Kevin. Punisher is basically Kevin, only instead of harming small animals and killing innocent people, he's going after bullies. So basically, Jason Aaron has turned the Punisher into We Need to Talk About Frank. And I'm not mad at it, I just worry about the message that any Punisher story sends to people who claim to be fans of the Punisher but don't get him. You know, like all the cops and people in the military who like to brandish Punisher logos because they think the Punisher is a real hero. You know, not a commentary on the failure of the criminal justice system as he was originally intended. But anyway, let me put my soapbox away. The Archpriestess, who we were introduced to in the first issue of this new run on Punisher, it's revealed that she approached him in the past when he was a kid, insinuating that she's been watching him this entire time. Apparently, she has always known about Frank Castle and was always aware that he was going to become the man who he is today. She goes on to talk about how originally the Hand had no interest in Western methodologies or really anything outside of Asia, that they felt that the only people who could potentially be the best members of the Hand would hail likely from Japan. But the Archpriestess, she felt otherwise. She actually felt that the best and brightest killers in all the world hail from America. And ultimately, this is where her sights were set towards Castle, even revealing that she killed anyone who disagreed with her about the fact that America was the best place to find their new leader. And she presents Castle at age 12 with the same question that she poses to him in the previous issue when she approached him for what we now realize was the second time, when she asked him which knife is his. Now, when he was a kid, he doesn't make a choice. He tells her to go off. And in this issue, she asks him yet again, which of these knives belongs to you? And this time he actually picks the correct one. And the knife that Castle ultimately picks belonged to the previous fist of the Hand. And this all sets him up for a meeting with what is presumably the Beast. Now we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. This actually takes place after the other thing I want to talk about, and that is why Frank Castle suddenly has superpowers. Superpowers is nothing unusual to Frank Castle. For the most part, he's always been a regular human being, but there have been a couple of different runs of Punisher where that was not necessarily the case. There's been a time in Punisher's life where he was an angel back in the mid to late 90s. He's also been a Frankenstein. There's even a future version of the Punisher that was not only a Herald of Galactus, but was also the Spirit of Vengeance. And it's funny that we bring up the Cosmic Ghost Rider, who was the aforementioned Herald of Galactus and Spirit of Vengeance, because that's kind of what Frank Castle just got as a massive upgrade to this otherwise normal human being. He now has something that's very eerily similar to Ghost Rider's Penance Stare. Remember the Apostles of War that we met in the previous issue, who Frank Castle had summarily murdered in the beginning of issue #1? One of them has returned, and they come offering a gift to him, but we all know what this really is. They're actually there to try to assassinate him. And Frank Castle pulls a move that we've never seen him do before, well, other than when he was the Cosmic Ghost Rider. His eyes turn blood red, and he seemingly can see everything that a person has ever done. All the people that they've killed, any sins they've ever committed, and presumably anything else for that matter. He can see it. Any act of wrongdoing, he can witness within that person. Where this differs from a penance stare is that where Ghost Rider, a spirit of vengeance, can see all these things within a person, he can inflict the pain and suffering that that person caused to all those events that he's witnessed on that person in kind. Punisher doesn't seem to have that ability, at least not yet. He can only see the evil that a person has done. Now, granted, he doesn't need the ability to inflict that pain on anyone because, as we see in this issue, he's more than capable of beating someone to death using a pair of shurikens as brass knuckles. This is what is called the Eyes of the Beast. Now, they don't just tell Castle all the sins that a person has committed. They also seemingly tell him any information that might be useful to him. Case in point, the apostle he just mercilessly beat nearly to death, he now knows that that man has a bomb inside of his body wired to go off should his heart stop. There's no way Frank could have known this by just looking at him. The Eyes of the Beast give Frank information in ways not even Microchip could. But remember in the previous issue, when Frank Castle asked the apostles who they worship, who they work for, I said right off rip, this is clearly Ares. They wear helmets very similar to Ares, and they're called the Apostles of War, and they deal in weapons of war. Who else would they work for? And as it turns out, that's exactly the case. Ares has now set his sights on Frank Castle, making it almost seem as though when he sent the apostle to meet with Frank, that it was under some guise of peace, that he was offering to help him, to sell him weapons. However, Frank was not interested in any of that because he felt like the apostles were doing too much. They were giving weapons of war to terrorist and hate groups, and he didn't want to get down with that. So he spurned the apostles of war, and even though Ares makes it seem at first as though, oh, he did want to help Frank, in truth, he actually didn't, because he's Ares. He always wants war to perpetuate itself, and what better war could there be than between himself and what some would consider a one-man war on pretty much all crime. Of course Ares wants the smoke, but I think by the time Ares gets his hands on Frank, Frank will not be the same Punisher as we've seen before. If he has already developed his own, version of the penance stare, something tells me he's going to gain more abilities now that he is met face to face with the god of the hand, the Beast. But anyways, that's everything you need to know about what's going on with Punisher. Let me know what you thought about it. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.